Is knowledge attainable? Can we know the truth? What does truth even mean? The most naive view possible is dogmatism. It is the belief that knowledge, even certainty, is available. The typical dogmatic person believes that God has revealed absolute true knowledge in the Bible, or perhaps through some human medium. Such people are probably usually called fundamentalists. Some people might similarly believe that scientific knowledge, or at least some of it, perhaps what they learned at school, is similarly absolutely certain. Their view is usually called scientism. Most philosophers and practicing scientists seem to think that it is a misunderstanding of the nature of scientific knowledge, which is importantly considered fallible. The problem with dogmatism is that it shuts down improvement, which requires critical assessment, and that requires the assumption that what is known may be false. That is why scientific knowledge has to be considered fallible, so that the possibility of improving on it is retained. I have to mention that, as if to confuse issues, some call their view scientism, but mean something other than a form of dogmatism. Any unwillingness to entertain the possibility of error in one's belief system is a sign of dogmatism. To be the opposite, an open-minded person, or a philosopher really, you need to critically examine your beliefs and the claims you encounter. Bishop George Berkeley took empiricism to the extreme. He did not want to assume that our observations are anything more than sensations. There does not have to be any real world beyond them. We can have new and different kinds of observations, but what we then know is what we have observed. But we can never be certain that anything is actually out there causing them. He then claimed that to exist is to be observed, esse est percipi, as he famously put it in Latin. This led him to subjective idealism in metaphysics, or at least he could argue for idealism this way. For epistemology, his argument does present a problem. The more so if and when you do not accept Berkeley's argument for idealism, which I will return to when discussing metaphysics. Can anything be known about reality with certainty? Or at all? Throughout history, there have been philosophers who have denied the possibility of certainty or even of all knowledge. If, like Descartes, you think that for something to count as knowledge, the idea that there is no certainty will mean there is no knowledge. Otherwise, you might accept that nothing is certain, but it can still count as knowledge. In both cases, you might call yourself a skeptic. One type of skeptic is someone who thinks that nothing can be considered true because it cannot be certain. Another skeptic might have no problem with calling something knowledge, as long as nothing is claimed to be known with certainty. That also includes skepticism itself. It is not even certain that nothing can be known with certainty. A modern form of skepticism is something called scientific skepticism. It was perhaps first mentioned in Paul Kurtz's The New Skepticism, Inquiry and Reliable Knowledge. I say perhaps because I have not read the book myself. I have been using the term scientific skepticism myself since the late 1990s. It seems to be becoming more popular now, but still many scientific skeptics are known just as skeptics. What they have in common is a scientific attitude and a desire to use critical scientific inquiry on popular issues such as the so-called complementary and alternative medicine, astrology, UFO sightings, and any type of paranormal or pseudoscientific claims. They generally accept the possibility of knowledge, especially scientific knowledge, but in the critical sense, admitting that even though science is the best tool we have for discovering or creating knowledge, it is still fallible. Other attitudes toward the possibility of knowledge could be described, and I will return to them in a later course. Now, let's take a look at various theories about truth instead, because those theories also reveal the general attitudes toward the possibility of knowledge. What do we mean when we say something is true? It seems to be a pretty important question, since truth is at least usually thought to be a criterion of knowledge. The question is about the structure of knowledge, and as you might guess, philosophers have come up with several different answers to it. I will now present the 4 most popular theories of truth. I have actually already mentioned the correspondence theory of truth earlier. It is perhaps the most intuitive way of thinking about truth. The idea is that a statement is true if it somehow corresponds to reality. There are, of course, problems with this view. For one, the difficulty of explaining what exactly is meant by correspond, because words and the reality those words try to describe are no doubt very different from each other. For another, we may find ourselves unable to ever claim anything to be true, because that would require us to show that the alleged correspondence does in fact obtain. I have already explained why that is a difficulty at the very least. Another very commonsensical way of thinking about truth is to see if the claim actually works or is useful. If a theory can be used to get the results we want, such as successfully sending a spacecraft to the moon, it would seem to make sense to call the theory true. One problem with this view is that something might seem to work, but for some other reason than what the theory claimed. Some specific belief might make us feel good or reduce our anxiety, but does it make sense to call it true just because the belief is useful that way? Isn't it obvious that even lies can have the same effects? Calling a theory or belief true just because it works may thus seem a bit counterintuitive after all. A famous maxim about justification states that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The point is that if we trust most of our beliefs to be more or less true, then a statement that contradicts them is more likely to be false than true. A true belief is one that coheres with our beliefs in general. Of course, if we happen to believe mostly false propositions, the opposite would seem to be the case. I have mentioned the consensus of experts more than once by now during this course. The significance is that it seems to make sense that if people, especially experts, agree on something, it is likely to be true. It would be odd if they all were incorrect. Yet that could be the case. Defining truth as the consensus view seems a bit odd, especially as we know that the consensus can change. Can truth be something that changes over time? I will explore these and other theories of truth in more detail during a later course. They are not only important for epistemology proper, but also for the philosophy of science, to which I will turn next. See you there.